still need to get those dang prop katanas at some point in time. I have foam ones in the garage, but they don't look very good anymore. They really don't look good anymore. The range of swords I have behind me on the wall, no matter how fake they may be, none of them are katanas. But I talked about One Piece, and now I'm kind of talking about Bleach a little bit, so probably a katana would be a good thing to have for a prop of some kind. But, we'll see what happens with that. Father's Day, Bleach. Yay. So today I am going to be doing the Father's Roundup for Bleach. I've done Brother's Day and I've done Mother's Day, and now it's up to Brother's Day. I had been debating about putting like a bunch of like tools and ties behind me for like prop, but I'm like, I don't want to haul a bunch of tools up here, and we don't have any ties in the house that are like, a tie for like a guy or anything. And I'm like, no, we don't have anything for that. And so never mind. For reference, it's because tools or ties are generally the gifts you get for your dad for Father's Day. I just got my dad a card, but we are going to go see a movie. I think we're going to go see Into the Spider-Verse for that movie. And then the day that this is going up, on Father's Day, we're going to be having lunch with my grandpa at the retirement home where he lives. So that'll be nice. Into the Bleach Fathers. So these are in somewhat of an order, in kind of the order that we're introduced to them a little bit, but also in a little bit of just like, this is the order I've made the notes in. So first off, we have Isshin Kurosaki, who is, of course, the father of Ichigo, Karin, and Yuzu. He's the head of the Kurosaki family. Although he is from the Shiba clan, he took the Kurosaki last name from his wife, from her. And, so for the last several years, he's been the main parent for Ichigo and Karin and Yuzu after their mother died, after Masaki died. Was killed by Grand Fisher, however you want to look at it. With Yuha Bach coming in there with the assist of making it that she doesn't have her Quincy powers anymore. Surprisingly enough, I should have probably put Yuha Bach here as like the father of all Quincy's, but I'm like, no, I don't want to. So I didn't, but there you go. You get the mention of him in that regard. But, Isshin Kurosaki is, of course, the former captain of the 10th Division of the Gotei 13, and he is currently the only doctor at the Kurosaki Clinic that he runs. Occasionally, Yuzu tends to help as like an assistant, as like a nurse type there, but Ichigo and Karin, I believe, both have probably had some form of like first aid training. Pretty sure all three kids have probably had some form of first aid training. So there are aspects where Isshin is a very good father. He does love and adore his children very, very much. But he's also Isshin, and that results in him, for some reason, randomly attacking Ichigo at various points in time, which I'm sure is partially a reference to him making sure that Ichigo is good when it comes to like self-defense and stuff like that, for like if hollows show up or things like that, so Ichigo is able to like defend himself. But it has cost them a lot in window repairs, given the amount of times that Isshin has been knocked out of the window of Ichigo's room whenever he tries to attack Ichigo in the morning to wake him up. So, yeah, there's that. Yuzu and Isshin tend to share sometimes the same brain cell at times, in regards to some of the interactions that they have, and then sometimes Karin is just like, oh God, why am I in this family? At times where she's just like, oh God, these two are idiots. Which is just fun interactions that we get with the characters that show the different relationships and stuff like that. So we get some fun things in that regard. We know that very recently in the anime, when they got to in the Thousand Year Blood War arc, we finally got the whole thing revealed to Ichigo about the fact that yes, he known for a while that his father was a Shinigami, given the fact that he showed up during the battle with Aizen, but now he's getting much more of a confirmation as to what happened, how he met Misaki and everything else. So we got that now in the anime. We know that at the end of the manga and probably at the end of the anime, when it gets around to it, Ishin shows up, and during the big, battle that's happening up in the Soul Palace / new Yuha box, new digs, that Ishin and Ryukin, who we'll be talking about in a moment, show up, and they help with trying to defeat Yuha. So there's that there. I'm assuming that, and I'll talk a little bit more about this when I get to Grandparents' Day. I'm assuming Ishin is probably a very good grandfather to Kazui, but that'll be for a different time. But I'm sure he just adores his grandson, and at whatever point in time Yuzu and Karin get married, I'm sure he also adores Orihime as his daughter-in-law. And at whatever point in time Yuzu and Karin get married, at whatever point in time they both end up finding a partner, I'm quite certain that he is going to be the either exceedingly overprotective father that is like, no man is good enough for my daughter, or I don't know, he depends on who it is, I guess, in that case. Moving on, we have Soken Ishida, who is the father of Ryukin and the grandfather of Uryu, but we're mostly talking about him as a father today in regards to his relationship with Ryukin. We don't actually get too much interaction of the two of them together, or instances where we see Ishin and Ryukin, or Soken and Ryukin interacting together. We got some of the stuff in the flashback that we got recently with the Everything But the Rain, that Soken isn't really at home very much, and when he is, he's probably not all that involved in Ryukin's life. And we kind of get hints of that way back at the beginning of Bleach, when Uryu is talking to Ichigo, and when we get the flashbacks with Uryu and talking about a Soken with Ryukin, that it's just like, yeah, Ryukin did not hold his father in the highest of regards the same way that Uryu did, and he has, I believe, stated that Soken was a much better grandfather than he was a father, because we do see the relationship between Uryu and Soken, and I'll go over that much more when I get to the grandparent setup, but we see that relationship, and it seems to be very good, and I think that it's Soken learned from his mistakes with everything that he did with raising Ryukin, and then he applies that to trying to help make Uryu better. But Ryukin still holds probably a fair amount of a grudge against his father in regards to some of those things. He probably put him through a lot of training and everything like that, a lot of very hard training. But we do know that Soken did trust Ryukin with the knowledge of how to turn someone that is a Quincy, that has run out of their Quincy power, and help turn them back into a Quincy to help them regain that power. So Soken at least trusted Ryukin enough to pass that knowledge on to him. And then, of course, moving into the next relationship for father, we have Ryukin to Uryu. And Ryukin, of course, the first time that we're really fully introduced to him in this series, feeling like a slight bit of a flashback where his hair is a different color than it should be. We do see Ryukin and Uryu talking in the flashback about Soken dying, and Ryukin doesn't really seem to care all that much. He's like, well, he shouldn't have been messing with the Hollows anyway. We know that Ryukin does not care very much for the life of being a Quincy at that point in time. But the first big introduction we get to him is, of course, Uryu running away from a Hollow after he does not have his powers anymore. His Quincy powers anymore. Ryukin shows up and just fires his bow, fires his arrow right through the Hollow and destroys it and saves Uryu. And then, of course, he gets Uryu to come with him, or however it ends up going, and puts Uryu through a whole bunch of training um, to get it where he has his powers back again. But of course, it's under the agreement that you're not allowed to associate with the Soul Reapers anymore. You're not allowed to associate with the Soul Society. And of course, Uryu is just basically like, when he finds out that Orihime's in trouble and that Ichigo and Chad are gonna go and try to save her and everything, that he's just like he like lawyer issues his way out of this, where he's just like, okay, well, I want to go help Orihime because she is my friend and she's a good person and she deserves to be helped and she doesn't deserve to be captured and tortured or whatever by Aizen. Admittedly, Aizen himself doesn't really torture her. It's some of the other hollows that Spada and stuff like that have more of that issue. But Uryu decides, yeah, I'm still gonna go and I'm gonna help save her, and he lawyer technicalities his way out of there. It's just like, hey, Uryu, if you don't want to become a doctor, you can always become a lawyer. And Uryu goes through all of that. We see some more of his and Ryuken's relationship later on. We get some hints of it during, I know it's not canon, but during the Bound arc, we have some of the interactions between the two of them, where Uryu is taken to the hospital where Ryuken runs, and we just get the two of them bickering at each other. And then, just much later on, when we get the Fullbringer arc, I think we see some of their interaction there again after, Uryu was hurt. And then, of course, we do get a little bit of interaction of them during the first half of the, 1,000-Year Blood War arc, where, Uryu wants to find out more about the Quincy's and Yuha Bach and everything else that's going on with that. Why an Arrancar can have Quincy abilities and stuff like that. And that's, he ends up finding all of this other information in the journal and everything. And, we know that at the end, as I mentioned before with Isshin, that Ryuken also shows up. And, I think if I remember correctly, Uryu does have this memory of Ryuken having to perform an autopsy, I guess would be the best way of putting it. Perform an autopsy on his own wife, on Katagiri, and I think Uryu ends up unfortunately seeing part of that, and that would be an exceedingly traumatic thing for a child of any age to watch, regardless of your own relationship with either of your parents. That would be a very traumatic thing, I would assume, for most children. For me, it would be, considering that neither of my parents are doctors. But I have an uncle that's a doctor, and I have a cousin that is a registered nurse, but no. And the uncle that's a doctor is retired anyway. He worked with x-rays, he was radiology and everything like that. So there's a big difference there. But moving on. But so we kind of see that relationship there. Uryu and Ryuken have a very strange relationship. So yeah. Moving on, in regards to Chad. So Chad, we never get his parents' names, but it is pretty much explained to us that his father is of Mexican descent and his mother is, no, it'd be the other way around. His father is of Japanese descent and his mother is of Mexican descent, because Chad's name is, Yasutaro Sato, so his name is Japanese. And we know that Chad was born in Japan, and then when he was very young, him and his parents moved to Mexico, and at some point after their death, that's when he was taken in by his father, or by his grandfather, by Oscar Joaquin de Rosa, which is a great name, by the way. And, so that's really all we get about Chad's parents. His dad, I think I mentioned the same thing about his mom when I did the Mother's Day episode, so there's not too much there. We get a similar thing when it comes to Orihime and her parents. Orihime and her brother and her parents, where it was her father was this alcoholic and he was abusive, and their mother was abusive as well, and that's why her brother took her as soon as he was 18 and left and took her to where they would be safe together. And he's the one that raised her, so there's all of that there. Moving into a slight more of the current generation of fathers before we go back a bit. So we do have Ichigo Kurosaki as a father. He is the father of Kazui Kurosaki, who is, of course, the son of Ichigo and Orihime. I'm quite sure that Ichigo is a very good father. He's probably quite a bit less startle your child and attack them than his own father was, but it also appears that Kazui has Soul Reaper powers, since we see him be able to change into a Soul Reaper and have a tiny mini, Tensizan Getsu, so I don't know exactly 100% how that would be explained. I hope he didn't have to go through the same process of fully becoming a Soul Reaper the same way that Ichigo did with, that had to do with that. That just does not seem like a fun thing to put your child through. And then also currently we have Renji Abarai, who is the child of, he's the father of Ichika Abarai, who is of course his daughter with Rukia. So we get those. Again, Renji seems to be a very good father, adores his daughter, is letting her train with other with other members of the Gotei to, I guess train up her own abilities as being a Soul Reaper. So we have that. Not too much else there because we haven't seen too much of that. I guess we'll have to see, like, if we get any more of like the Hell arc that they're working on. We'll see exactly what happens there. Maybe we'll get some additional things, in the anime later on, when they get to that in the anime, when they get to that in the 1,000-Year Blood War arc. Next up, we have Nanao Issei's father, who would be, Yishinsui Kyoraku's brother, older brother. I went over him a bit during the Brothers Day video, but it is Nanao's father, married Nanao's mother, who was the head of the Issei clan, and he ended up dying at some point, probably a little while after Nanao was born, but then again, it's the Soul Society, and we don't know exactly how quickly souls age in the Soul Society, so I don't know. It's hard to determine that, because like Rukia goes in the course of like 150 years, goes from being a baby all the way up to being, her, current age at the moment where it is in the anime, where she is for the majority of the anime, before they get the 10-year time skip into the future. So that was 150 years, and Rukia looks like she's like 16, 17 years old at that point in time. And then we have other characters that are, look older, and we don't know their exact ages. We know that, Yamamoto was exceedingly old. Same thing with Unohana, but she was, she also just looked so much younger. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes in with that. Shunsui, he has looked after Nanao as much as he can and everything like that. So he's at least tried to do what he can to, honor his brother and his sister-in-law's memories in that regard. So there's that. Now we're going to move into the Kuchiki clan. So we have Ginrei Kuchiki, who is the father of Byakuya, but that's not the relationship we're focusing on at the moment. We are going to focus on his relationship with his son Sogen Kurosaki. Kuchiki. Sorry. So we know that Ginrei was the 27th head of the Kuchiki clan, and he was succeeded by Byakuya, which means that his son died before Byakuya, before Ginrei did. We also know that Byakuya was Ginrei's lieutenant at one point in time as well in the 6th division. But we also see I don't know if we 100% see Sojin during the Turn Back the Pendulum arc, but he would have been probably the lieutenant at the time. I don't know if we ever really end up getting too much of an interaction with him. Um, I think from what I remember, he was much more of not 100% a pacifist, but I don't think he liked fighting quite as much as like Ginrei or as Byakuya does. Not that Byakuya is 100% like, oh, I have to fight all the time, but he's like a little bit more. He's less hesitant to want to fight than like some of the other ones that we've seen. So I don't think that there's too much there. And then Sojin is Byakuya's father. And we know that he would have been around at least for a little while Byakuya, after Byakuya was born. I don't think we ever get any information on Byakuya's mother. She was probably some other like high-ranked, either very strong Shinigami or a high-ranked noble, probably not from any of the other royal clans, but probably from like another noble clan or something like that. But I will point this out. Byakuya did marry Hasane, and she was just like the common as you're probably going to get in the Soul Society in regards to like not having any type of royal or noble or whatever blood from many of the houses. And he was still allowed to marry her. So that begs the question of, could Sojin have married a woman in the same circumstances, and Byakuya's mother is not actually of any type of royal or noble blood, and Ginrei didn't have a problem with that? We never get an exact answer as to when either Ginrei or Sojin died. Ginrei probably died sometime before Byakuya found Rukia, because he is not there, and I don't think we ever get any mentions of him interacting with Rukia. And Sojin definitely died long before then, because I believe Byakuya was already the head of the clan and the captain of the 6th Division by the time Rukia became adopted into the family. But that does make Sojin's, by technicality, Rukia's adopted father. There's not too much there. It is stated that Sojin was killed in action, but it doesn't tell us too much else. It said he was buried alongside his wife, but we don't have any other information about that. Next up, for a few other ones that are connected to the Gotei 13, we have Jinemon Kotsubaki, who is the father of Sentaru Kotsubaki. Sentaru Kotsubaki is the current lieutenant of the 13th Division, so he is Rukia's lieutenant. And he is the former co-third seat along with, what was her name? Kiyone, along with Kiyone. So they have that connection there. But so Jinemon was actually the lieutenant under Lovakawa 100 years ago. And assumedly, he may have become like the interim captain for the 7th Division after everything happened with Love and with the rest of the visors when they were banished. He may have become a temporary captain in that regard before. I think it would have been 7th Division would have been Sajin, would have been Komamura, I believe. So he probably may have been like the interim captain before Sajin came along, just to like keep things flowing and keep things moving, kind of the way that we know that Izuru became like a temporary leader and stuff like that for the 2nd Division, or sorry, for the 3rd Division. I was right the first time, for the 3rd Division. And that we've seen that happen before in the series, where it's like, oh, the captain is gone and now they need someone to be like the temporary captain for a little while to keep the ship going, before a new captain is able to be determined or something like that. We saw some of that happen after, a bunch of, after everything happened with Aizen. So that happened there. Jinemon, we don't know if he's still alive. He could still be very much alive. He just might be retired. So there's that. Next up, Mayuri Kuratsuchi. Oh, God. To Nemu Hachigo / Nemuri Hachigo / Nemu Kuratsuchi. So, big one. Yeah. So obviously, Mayuri is, of course, the current captain of the 12th Division. Nemu is his former lieutenant. She was his lieutenant for, I would say, a good number of years, but we don't know exactly. We know that she was part of this experiment that he developed, the Nemuri project, that was that Mayuri developed in an attempt to try to create a living soul out of nothing, is kind of what his intention was. And we saw during the battle with Pernida in the manga, and when we get to that in the anime eventually, whatever point in time that is, we'll see, a bit more of this flashback where we might get a tad more information thrown in about some of the, Nemuri experiments. We know a lot of those experiments led to failure, but still learning stuff, which is the way that Mayuri tends to function in regards to a lot of his experiments. We see that eventually, he was able to develop her, and, he starts calling her Nemu instead of Nemuri, which she liked being called Nemuri, which Nemuri is like sleeping type of a thing. And then Nemu, I think, just if I remember correctly from other stuff I've read, just means like silk tree or something like that. Don't you can check me on that if you want. I don't remember exactly, but we know that during the Soul Society arc, when Uryu ends up having to fight Mayuri, Mayuri basically uses Nemu as this distraction, as this way of pinning Uryu down so he can infect him with, the neurotoxins to make it that he can't move and everything like that. We see a lot of that happens. We see that Nemu tends to be, to a degree, is like very much not all that expressive with her emotions most of the time. We see that go a little bit, she gets a little bit better at that throughout the course of the series, and stuff, becoming a little bit more of a fully actualized person. And we see the culmination of that during the battle with Pernida, when, we see from like the first battle that Mayuri is with Nemu at during the Soul Society arc, where he uses her as like a trick and bait and everything like that against Uryu. He stabs her to stab Uryu. He doesn't care that she gets hurt. He's like, oh, I'll fix her later or whatever. He seems to be slightly more concerned about her during the battle against Xyloparo, but not a whole lot more concerned about her. And then later on, the big climax of that we kind of see their relationship kind of fully coming to a head is during the battle with Pernida. When they're in the Soul King's palace setup. And, Nemu, she protects Mayuri several times throughout that battle. She does things that surprises him with being able to actually, like, use certain powers more than he expected her to be able to do, if at all. And he does actually see her as finally being he finally sees her as actually, he finally did create life. He created her, and she has become this full actualized person. And at the end of the battle, she does sacrifice herself, and of course Mayuri, kind of quote unquote allows this, but he doesn't have much of a choice at the time. She sacrifices herself, and Pernida, eats her, and then Mayuri is able to take her brain, so that way, Pernita's body can't just like stop the, infinite cloning and healing thing, and then it just blows up. And then Mayuri, of course, keeps her brain with him, which is a very disturbing thing, when he's in like the healing tank. And his intention is, of course, we then see after the time skip, 10 years later or whatever, he has cloned her again, and now there is Namuri Nanago 9, yes. And she is just this little child that follows Mayuri around. And he seems to be a bit more gentle with her than he was with Nemu. Because as much of a horrible person as Mayuri is, he has shown that he does actually care about Nemu, kind of right near the end, and then now he's got Namuri again, and he seems to be being a much better father with her than he had been with Nemu in the first place. So that hopefully is going to be a better relationship there. I still don't expect him to be an exceedingly warm and fuzzy father and affectionate, but I hopefully at least a better one. Moving on to the other captain of the 12th Division that kind of basically ended up being a father, we have Kisuke Urahara. So part of this little bit is kind of revealed in I think it's the Can't Fear Your Own World light novel, where Kisuke explains that Ururu and Jinta are basically kind of the same way that Nemu is, which a lot of people thought they were anyway, given the fact of how Ururu tended to act compared to like how Nemu kind of tended to act to a degree, how she is a bit more subdued in her emotions and everything like that, and can like switch into like battle mode and stuff like that happened when the Arrancar attacked. So there is that thing. And also Ururu and Jinta are basically like brother and sister anyway. And Kisuke and Tessai are basically like their fathers. They have this like little family unit that they all tend to act as and everything. And I guess to a degree you could, possibly say that oh god, why is it that sometimes I can't remember the names? Come on. Whatever. But like they have this great little family unit that they're a part of. And I'll remember the name eventually, and then I'll be like, why couldn't I remember that name? Cat girl. Yoruichi. I'm like, I'll get the name eventually. Yoruichi is kind of a little bit like the mom in that regard, but not 100%. She's like the weird aunt that shows up every now and then. The weird, cool aunt that will kick your butt if you make her mad. Is kind of the role that she plays in that family a little bit. But Kisuke is very protective and very nurturing of Uru and Jinta and everything like that. We see at one point in time he does comfort Uru if she's worried about something. There's also, he is exceedingly worried about her when she gets hurt while trying to protect the shop from the Arrancar when they show up and attack. He is very concerned about her safety and everything like that, as are Jinta and Tessai and such. Although we know that Mayuri used his own genetics to a degree to try to create Nemu. I don't know if Kisuke used his own genetics to try to create Uru or Jinta. I don't know if that's ever explained. I mean, if he did, that's perfectly logical. Use his or Tessai's genetics to be able to make them, but I don't know if that's what they did or not. Then again, Kisuke was kind of left to his own devices in the human world for 100 years, so that's a possibility. Also, I love it. I think it's just in one of the filler episodes or whatever of the anime that, like, because I don't know if that's in the actual manga, where it's just like, okay, we're gonna go on a vacation, and just like they're all headed off to the airport, and that's just like funny. um, I just find that funny. It's just like, yep, off to vacation we go. So we have that. Next up, so I kind of skipped this family a little bit when I was doing the brothers and Mother's Day one, but it was on accident. So I do have Jushiro Ukitake's father here. So Jushiro is the father, or is the eldest son of this very low class aristocratic family. So he has five brothers and two sisters, and and he is the one that mainly supports them, probably in his from his job as being the captain of the 13th Division and everything like that. We also know that when Uketake was very young, um, that his parents, who were very superstitious because Uketake became very ill, they took him to the shrine of the Mimihage and they prayed there, and they prayed for it and it saved their child's life. It saved Jushiro's life, and then that is why he was then able to survive and then become a Shinigami and everything like that, and become a captain and one of the longest serving captains up to that point. For over 100 years he was one of the captains. um but there's not too much else we ever hear about his family. We don't get any other mentions of them in regards to, oh, this is where, um, this is where this happens, this is where that happens. There's not really too much else there. We know later on, Jushiro goes back to the shrine and prays to the Mimihage and then lets it kind of possess him and everything like that, which really in the long run doesn't really end up doing anything. So it's kind of a pointless endeavor there. That was a fruitless endeavor on your part. Now you're dead, unfortunately. And I really like Jushiro. I really, really like Jushiro. So we also have the Omaida family, which generally gets talked about in most of these videos for the most part. We have, and I'm going to butcher the name, I apologize, Marin Noshin Omaida, who is the father slash head of the Omaida clan. He is the former lieutenant of the 2nd Division under Yoruichi Shihoen 100 years ago. And probably during the time frame that after Yoruichi was banished slash fled to the human world, he probably became the interim captain before Soifun took over. And then, of course, now his son is, of course, the current Lieutenant Omaida, Marechio. And the Omaida children, as I've gone over before, are Marime, Mare Jirosabu, sorry, Marechio, and Mirio, who is the cute, adorable daughter. He went from looking somewhat decent in his 100 years ago to having a weird afro now. We do know that the Omaida family is pretty wealthy, given the fact that it is stated that Marechio himself has paid for upgrades and remodeling to the 2nd Division barracks and headquarters and stuff like that, to make them a little bit more, I guess, up to date and stuff like that, and paid for that with his own money. We know that I would assume that Marechio's father, Miranoshin, was probably, he was the lieutenant, so he probably was pretty good at his job, considering the fact that if you get to the if you get to the place of lieutenant, given the fact that that's something that is, a very high honor to get to within the, Shinigami, within the Gote, that he was probably pretty good at his job in that regard. And, Marechio, as much as you may not necessarily care that much for Marechio, he has proven himself, and we're going to see very shortly in the anime, when we get to it in the 1,000-Year Blood War arc in the second half, that there are going to be a bit more of things for where Marechio can shine in regards to him trying to protect his sister. I don't know if we ever find out any more about like Marechio's family beyond some of the little bits that we get here that I've kind of mentioned here with him and his siblings and his parents. But that's what we have. So we don't really get too much other information about that family. Next up, we have Coyote Stark. And if you want to at me in regards to him being a father to Lynette, go ahead. I see it that they have that very, very good father-daughter type relationship. To a degree, it also borders on like brother-sister to a degree. But I see it more as like this father-daughter setup where he, does what he can to protect her and take care of her and everything like that. And then they argue like father and daughter do to a degree as well. So there's that connection there. They are to a degree, half of each other, because of how they were split and everything like that into being, formed into a Ronkar. After being, the exceedingly powerful Hollow and everything like that. So there's that connection, that bond that they share. Also, Lynette doesn't really like to take flack from him at all, which I just find hilarious. And I wish they hadn't died during the fake Karakura Town arc. Really wish they hadn't, because I really liked them. Next up, we have some Fullbringer parents, and I think that should finish it out after I go through the Fullbringer parents. So, first off, we have Kiriko Kutsuzawa's father. So, Kiriko is the one that is the older gentleman in the Fullbringers that has the eye patch and the mustache. And he has the watch, and his power, his Fullbringer power is like time tells no lies, or however it goes. And so in Giriko's youth, he received this pocket watch, which is supposed to be like this good luck watch of the family. And it was, has been passed down for generations, for several generations, and eventually it ended up being Giriko's. But his father died from a sickness while he still owned the watch. So it's just like, this is not a good luck watch. I would say this is a cursed watch, and I would have not used it. Giriko's father is dead. We don't know anything else really about him beyond the fact that there was this weird watch that gets passed down in his family, and it's a little bit of a jumbled answer in my opinion. Then we have Yukio's father. So, I went over this a little bit in when I talked about Yukio's mother. Yukio's parents, his father is this businessman, probably in Germany, given their last name. And, Yukio doesn't think that the names mother and father are all that important to him, and his parents had like shut him off into a spacious, they kind of like, oh yeah, you're here, but we don't really care. You're just here. And, he made fake video game versions of his parents, like AI versions of his parents that were the types that he wanted. And then eventually he ends up, he stole his father's money via computer hacking and everything else. And then he, ruined his father's business and ran away. And then eventually he hears that his parents died. It's a decent way of putting it. So, again, not a very good family relationship there. Not a very good one there. And then the last one that I have for this is Jackie's parents. So Jackie Tristan, I think I've stated before that Jackie Tristan is my favorite out of all of the Fullbringers, even though she's technically not a Fullbringer anymore, just given the fact that she doesn't have her Fullbringer powers anymore, but she was my favorite out of them. Jackie and her family, I think they either lived in Mexico or somewhere in South America, Central or South America, given kind of what we kind of hear about them. So Jackie's father was he was either a member of the cartel or connected to the cartel in some way. When Jackie was a kid, he gave her this pair of leather boots that were most likely stolen, but she didn't care. She kept them, and she kept them clean, and she took good care of them and everything. And, had one day, unfortunately, she shows back up, and she finds both her parents and her brother dead in their home. And during that incident, that is what actually ends up causing her Fullbringer powers to activate, and she gets her Dirty Boots powers, which I just like her design and everything like that, and her Dirty Boots design and everything that goes along with that. So there's not really too much else that we get with that. I can't think of any other additional information that we've gotten. I know there's some other characters that get brought up in the light novels and stuff like that, but I haven't read them, so beyond a little bit of information that ties into some of the other characters that I mentioned here, there's not really too much else that I can put in about them. I think there's another Fullbringer girl that has like another connection to, you know, the other Fullbringers, but it's not, I don't know exactly, so, and I kind of don't care. But that's what we have for Father's Day for Bleach. Later this week, so on Wednesday, there should be a video up about Cobra in my Rulers and Leaders series. There should be one about King Nefertari D Cobra. Should be up on Wednesday. I do not know at the moment if I will have a video out later this week, just because of how busy work has been and stuff with family and everything like that. There might be another video on like Thursday or Friday next week or this week, but I'm just not sure yet. So yeah, at the very least, 2 of the 3 videos this week are going to be based around fathers, since this one's about fathers, and then the one on Wednesday is going to be about Cobra, who I would say is definitely one of the top ranked fathers in One Piece, for various reasons. So that's what we have. I thank you very much, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. And remember to tell your dad Happy Father's Day, or whoever the father figure in your life is. Bye.